Okay, so I'm going to do a really quick demo on how we're going to build our three layered cake. And first, we're going to start off by cutting our layers. And first, what you want to do with your layers is you want to figure out where you want to cut. So what I'm going to do is, since I have a rather thick layer here, I'm going to just, I want a bit of a thicker layer. So I'm going to just do a 1 1/4 inch. Okay, and I'm going to go around and I'm going to just use my ruler to figure out where that 1 1/4 inches. And the toothpicks are going to be my guide for my bread knife. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, hopefully you can see this, and I should move. Okay, so hopefully you'll be able to see this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my knife underneath my toothpicks. And I'm just going to move my bread knife from one toothpick to the other to make an incision. I'm going to do this on all 3 of my layers. And then I'm going to insert my bread knife and just cut through that layer. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing that I had previously done with the last layer. And if you have a shorter squat layer, you're not going to take much off. So I'm going to just go with the same size. And I'm just going to take the very little amount off, actually. And I actually did on top this time of the toothpicks without realizing it. So remember to always, you want to go underneath your toothpicks. Okay, So I'm going to do this one more time. And remember, if this is not really clear, we do have a complete tutorial on my channel. It's also on Talon platform for you to watch. Okay, once again, I'm going to go underneath as my guide, underneath my toothpicks, and I'm going to take my toothpicks out. Okay, so now I have a nice layer. That's the third of my layer. Okay, so what I want to do is just just clean off my surface and start building my cake. Now I use kind of a shelf liner so that it doesn't move, but you can also use a wet piece of napkin or paper towel, and that works just fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a kind of a round big blob of buttercream, simple buttercream, and then I'm going to start with my bottom tier. And then with our cakes, we're going to fill them with a simple buttercream. And that is in your recipe packet. Now, all you have to do is just put your simple buttercream in a bag and cut a hole, and it'll give a nice bead. You want a big enough bead so you're not straining so much with your hand, and enough comes out. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go back and forth. And I'm going to see if we can figure this out so you can see it better. There we go. So okay, much better. Okay, so what I'm doing is to level out my filling is I'm just holding my arm against my side, and then I have my my spatula actually flat against the icing, and then it's tilted up a bit, so it's not actually flat like that. If I do it flat, I'm going to end up with icing on top. of my spatula. So what I'm doing is I just have it tilted up a bit and I'm just spreading that out as I go along. Okay. And it does take some practice. Okay, so second layer. So this cake will have 3 layers of sponge and two layers of frosting. So now, as you see, I've had some crumbling issues with this cake. It's not going to be a big deal because that's going to be filled in with frosting, so I'm not too worried about that. If you have the same problems, it's just go along with it. It's just going to be filled in anyway, so it should be fine. So once again, I'm just holding my spatula flat, and I'm going to swipe away. And then I have my top layer here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just kind of get rid of this excess a bit. I'm just going to push it back into the cake. Okay. And then what I want to do from here is I want to trim. I want to trim a little bit, so I want to have a space between, if you can see that, between your cake and your board here. So I want to have like maybe an eighth of an inch, or maybe a quarter of an inch. So what I'm doing is I'm just very lightly going and just as a sawing motion, going down and just trimming this cake a bit. So I'm basically just kind of getting the brown edges off of this cake. And if you're having trouble with cutting, like say for instance, you're just having trouble with it moving around and sliding around, you can always just put it in the freezer or the fridge to kind of make it a little bit more stable, and that should help. Because this is kind of, the middle tier is just wanting to really not cooperate with me right now. So okay, so now I'm going to just take the excess off here so you can see the space. Okay, so I'm going to clean that off. So now you can see that I have a space between my board and my cake all the way around. And this is so that your cake will not be peeking through your final buttercream. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to apply a crumb coat. So now we're going to apply a crumb coat with our Swiss, and we're going to apply a final coat with our Swiss. You just want to fill your cake with the simple buttercream, okay? So I'm going to go around, I'm using my speed tip here. That should be in your kit. And you don't want a lot of buttercream. Okay, so I'm just going around and putting some here and some there. And then what I'm going to do is, and this takes a little bit of practice, you don't necessarily have to do the back and forth motion, is if you're having trouble with the back and forth motion, you can always go up and down like this. Okay, but you do want to make sure that you get all of that buttercream on the cake, so it really makes sure that it pastes those crumbs against your cake. You don't want any crumbs floating around in your final buttercream. So I'm just making sure it covers. And also, as you can see, I have plenty of excess. So that also means that you really just don't need a lot for your crumb coat. And so I'm going to go around with a plastic bench scraper. You can also use the one in your kit, which has a very nice and sharp edge to it, and we're going to be using that a little bit later on. I'm just going around and I'm just getting the excess off. So it's nice and pasted on there. It kind of almost looks like a naked cake. Okay, and then you want to have an extra bowl for your buttercream that has crumbs in it. Okay, you don't want to put it back in your fresh bowl of buttercream. So I'm going to just go around once again and get that excess off. Okay, so now for our top, we're going to put a final coat on our top. Now you can chill your cake after this just to let it set up for a little bit before putting on your top. But since time is of essence, I'm just going to show you now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around and I'm going to put a nice thick amount of buttercream on my top. Okay, so I'm going to flatten that out like I would if I was working on one of the fillings. Okay, so I'm just going to go back and forth, turning my table. And what I'm doing is, once again, I have my spatula to the side of my body, and I'm just holding that spatula flat against the cake with the spatula upward. So this part actually facing up. And that's spreading it out, and I'm going to slide it away. So I don't have any crumbs on it. So this is like the final coat. And then from there, I'm going to take one of my parchment papers. This is one of your 8-inch parchment papers that you were given. I just cut it down a little bit so that it doesn't drape over. And I'm placing it down on the top. Okay. And then I'm just going to put some buttercream between, or actually on top of your parchment. Okay. Just spread it around a little bit. So you want a pretty good amount. Okay. The reason being is you want your top board to stick pretty well. Okay. So I've just placed it on there, but before I press it down, I want to make sure that my top and my bottom board are even. So see how they're actually lining up together against my bench scraper. Okay, I want them to actually line up. And once I know that they're lined up, I'm going to press down just to make sure that that is adhered to the cake. Okay, if you've got some buttercream hanging out, that's okay. You can just take your spatula and just swipe that out. So from here, I'm going to put this cake in the freezer, and I'm going to grab another one and show you how we do our sides. So just hang tight. Okay, so this is another one that I was working on, and this is just to show what we do after we have chilled our cake and we have our top all done and everything like that. So what we're doing here is we're filling our sides from the top cardboard to the bottom. This is going to make it so that we have straight sides. Instead of having like a tent or like a top hat or something. These are nice straight sides. So I'm going to fill in that space. And if you run out of buttercream, just feel free to fill your bag. I'm going to fill my bag. So now I have here more buttercream, and remember that this is Swiss. This is not your simple, you want to use Swiss, okay? It makes it much easier to get a nice smooth surface with Swiss. It also chills better and it's more stable than simple buttercream. Makes it a lot easier for cakers to work with. So what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that everything, every nook and cranny is filled with my final buttercream. Now if you have a gap like I have here, I have a gap here so you can see. I'm filling those in as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do from here is I'm using my bench scraper that has the really fine edge to it, and I'm just getting rid of excess. And I'm going to put it in a clean bowl. So I'm just going to scrape that in because I'm going to be using that again. You don't want any crumbs in that. You don't want to mix it with your crumbs. So I'm just doing that. Very slowly. Okay, so I've noticed a few things here. So I'm just going to fill in those spots. So I'm just going to get rid of some excess. Now, as you can see, it is really, it's not very smooth. And the reason being is there's a lot of air in Swiss, but also because I have not yet put it into the freezer or the refrigerator to chill it. And once it's chilled, this is a nice solid mass, and then you can kind of put some areas in there or fill areas and then scrape it, and then you will get a nice finish. So tomorrow we're going to go over our top for our live, and we're also going to go over how to decorate your cake based on the project or the assignment, and putting it on a drum board, working with your border, your bottom border and a top border, and also doing flowers with decorator icing, so you need to have that as well. And what else? Just different ideas ideas. If you want to do roses, you can do succulents, but flowers aren't necessary for this assignment. All I'm looking for is a bottom border and some sort of top border. So, all right, so we'll be back tomorrow, and we'll probably be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and I will give you more info later this evening. So thanks for watching.